Okay, my name is Matthew McQueenie. There's a little bit of podcast nerd humor in this title. The thing that holds up the microphone that you always see, the big arm, is called a boom arm. So why podcasting is armed for a boom. How many people in here have ever listened to a podcast? Okay, now that's better than the numbers you see in total, but I think with a younger group we're finding that many of us have. It's just a part of our lives. So 3 reasons I'm going to kind of weave through this why we are in a podcasting boom. 1 is consumer tastes, as we've seen here. 2 is the current technology. And 3 is the market opportunity. So first off, we're going to just take it back to the history here. Not a long one. First podcast was ever made in 2004. An MTV VJ named Adam Curry put out an episode. This is obviously a quick hitting timeline. There's a lot more things that have happened, but this is an interesting one. You see a company here, Audio, and then you see Apple Podcasts. Audio was going to be the first platform for podcasts ever that everyone was going to use. And then early in 2005, Apple said, we're going to add podcasts to our iTunes. And Audio went, we're going to have to pivot. The interesting thing with Audio, they pivoted to Twitter. So they actually had a hackathon, and Twitter came from that. So a couple of prominent podcasters that are on the market today. Bill Simmons, the sports guy, started in 2007. WTF, we know what that stands for, with Marc Maron. Joe Rogan, same year. I started mine in 2013, so I wasn't going to put myself in here. Serial in 2014, that was sort of the big hit that brought a lot of people to the medium. And over this past year, Spotify has started buying a lot of podcasts, about $500 or $600 million in podcast purchases. The thing I love with podcasts are that they're like the old business stories, the Silicon Valley, where they start in garages, rock bands where they start in garages and they become these great world-changing entities. This was Joe Rogan's first episode, Christmas Eve, 2009, at a comedy club. There's snowflakes around it. There's a sheet that even looks kind of like Bernie Sanders, but you jump ahead, beautiful studio, 200 million downloads a month, making $30 million a year, and he's got presidential candidates on his podcast. I think that's an amazing thing. Marc Maron, the same thing. Barack Obama actually came to his literal garage where he hosts his podcast. You have an air conditioner here, you got guitars. It took a week to get Barack Obama there with the Secret Service because it's just a normal neighborhood. I mean, it's pretty amazing. This little coffee cup is still in his studio. He put one of those glass things over it because it says President of the United States of America.
Oh, that's funny.
So the growth opportunities, we've seen here how many of us listen to them. So there's a really good company, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of them, called Edison Research, and they're actually based here in New Jersey, and they do a lot of the statistical analysis year by year on the growth of things we do with our ears. So this was the first year where the total U.S. population, 12 plus, who's ever listened to a podcast. So we have about 100% here. But this was the first time it jumped over 50%. So it's a very big moment. You see the ascent there. Here's some other major numbers from that report. And the new one should actually be out in the next week or so. So we'll probably see more growth. 17 more million people in the U.S. are aware of podcasting than the year before. 20 more million in the U.S. have ever listened to a podcast than in 2018. 17 more million more monthly podcast listeners. 14 more million weekly podcast listeners. So it is an absolutely growing, nearly booming market. This was another interesting statistic I saw. So this is the amount of the amount of time you spend watching television, and this is the amount of time people spend with mobile devices. So television's actually dropping in time, mobile's going up. I think podcasting is a very, obviously, mobile activity. So we all have it in our pocket. We are all a potential customer. It's also ubiquitous. It's on our smart speakers. It's on our smart TVs. It's coming into our cars more and more. And it's an active and passive activity. Video, we have to actually choose to watch it. We have to sit down. With some of these TV shows now, we literally have to focus on every single detail. Otherwise, we're going to miss the rabbit hole we'd have to go down. Podcasts, you just get a little earbud in your ear. I'm with my kids. I'm doing chores. Oh, absolutely, I'll do the chores. Absolutely. I got a podcast. There's also a lot of people who listen to podcasts on 2 times speed, 3 times speed. There's even an app that goes to 10 times speed because they want to get through so many, so many podcasts. So the market opportunity, the last item we're going to talk about here. So we all know about how much is being spent on video, right? But it was staggering when I actually saw this. I added this all up, and it comes out to $120 billion that have been spent on original content that we have less and less time to watch. Podcasting has not been something that people have been spending a ton of money on, but it's starting. Apple has announced that they're going to start funding exclusive podcasts on their platform. Spotify has, as we said before, they bought 4 companies, including the aforementioned Bill Simmons podcast for $200 million, but they've spent upwards of $600 million. But we're talking $1 billion versus $120 billion. So there's a real opportunity here with a medium that we have more time to spend time with. So that is the crux of my presentation.